My friends and I live in a very nice area. Try and picture the quintessential suburban neighborhood. It's relatively quiet, and people are used to the secluded, isolated feel it provides. The last place you'd expect anything dangerous to really happen. With the exception of what I'm about to tell you, my town radiated the calming silence you'd eventually come to crave. This happened a few summers ago, and as much as I try to resist it, I will never be able to erase the memory from my mind. Anyway, my friend Chaz and I had always been those kids to try to cause trouble wherever we could. Looking back, I struggle to justify our behavior. I guess it was our teenage manifestation of a rebellious spirit or some shit like that. We lived on the same street and hung out after school every single day. Because our neighborhood consisted of nothing but very large houses and towering trees, we didn't usually have much to do on weekdays, unless we wanted to journey a few towns over. So we ended up making our own fun most of the time. In our neighborhood, there was a well-known mansion at the top of a hill that had been abandoned for as long as people could remember. It wasn't really special. Every kid who lived in my town had been inside. The rooms were essentially stripped of anything of value, and finding a wall that wasn't coated with multiple layers of spray paint was almost impossible. It was especially creepy because it stood at the edge of a massive cemetery. For Chaz and I, this cemetery mansion was a kind of default, a plan B if we will. If we had nothing else to do, we'd throw some graffiti up inside or just smoke and chill on the roof. This was one of those nights. It was like 3 a.m. on a Wednesday, and Chaz and I had just been flaked on by a couple girls that we made plans with. The two of us were kind of upset, so we figured chucking rocks at the cemetery mansion would be a decent way to release some energy. Had we been sober, we might have been more cautious about doing something so stupid. But it was late, it was summer, and we didn't care. I convinced Chaz not to drive. We were more than a little drunk. And after about a 20-minute walk, we crested the hill and were met with a familiar yet eerie sight. Vines twisting and hanging down the muddied bricks, most of the windows shattered, menacing points at the tip of the roof. Definitely a sinister feel, especially at such an ungodly hour of the night. Without warning, Chaz picked up a stone and chucked it towards the house. It sailed gracefully before smashing through one of the fourth-floor windows. It was difficult to confirm in the low light of the moon and surrounding streetlights, but the deafening sound of the shattering glass confirmed it. Gleefully, I picked up a rock and did the same, puncturing one of the second-floor windows. Before the mansion's fourth floor, there was a single small window, probably an attic, that stood lonely as the highest room in the house. Chaz challenged me to hit it. I missed a good 10 throws before giving up with an aggravated sigh. Chaz grinned, picked up a rock, and said, "Watch this." He took a long look at the tiny target and launched it. I watched in awe as the rock flew through the air, shattering the attic window with a satisfying crash. I was shocked. The two of us stood there for a second, admiring what just happened. Chaz was about to pick up another rock, when I, still looking at the shattered window, saw a dark object fly out of the emptiness and sail down towards us. I literally jumped, confused as to what I just saw. Chaz and I looked down at the rock that had just landed on the gravel in front of us, the exact same rock Chaz had just thrown. It was easily recognizable, as it had a sort of Z imprint on one of the faces. The two of us stood there in silence, obviously a little shaken up. It was really late for other kids to be doing the same thing we were, but that was the only explanation we could come up with. We agreed that it must have been a group of teenagers trying to mess with us, an idea that actually excited us. The devious grins on our faces told the story. We were going to try and get the jump on them before they could scare us. The two of us quietly made our way to the front door, ducking under a thick vine that hung from the towering pillars above. The door was slightly ajar, but it always was. It had long since been misaligned from its hinges and didn't close properly. As quietly as we could, we stepped inside, our eyes adjusting to the minimal light and our noses to the smell of mildew and rotting wood. We slowly made our way up the creaky stairs, unable to silence the sound of shifting wood beneath our feet. We had made it to the fourth floor, and were positioned at the base of the final staircase. Interestingly, we had never been up there. The entrance to the roof was on the opposite side of the house, and this room must have eluded us. Chaz took the lead, and I followed directly behind. The staircase led to a small wooden door, which we presumed was the attic door. Chaz put a hand on the doorknob, and even looked back at me. I nodded, and in one fluid motion, he flung the door open. Before I could even see anything, I was struck by the smell that made me take a few reactionary steps backward. It was disgusting. It smelled like death and rot. Something was clearly decaying in that room. Chaz covered his nose and entered. I was a little more hesitant to do so, but I decided that I'd rather be by his side than alone on a pitch-black staircase. The sight was even worse than the smell. We found ourselves staring at a tiny room, the floor of which a white pentagram was painted. There were a few unlit candles and a closet door that we didn't open. The smell seemed to be emanating from that closet, and I was worried Chaz would want to investigate more. To our surprise, the room was void of people. I had enough, though. This was really starting to freak me out, and I couldn't fight the urge to leave any longer. I turned towards the door, and that's when I saw it. I looked down the staircase and saw two cloaked figures looking back up at me. I cursed and ran towards Chaz. Just then, we heard stomping up the stairs from behind us. We were screwed. As the stomping got closer to the door, I was prepared to fend off whoever it was, bracing myself for a fight. Just then, Chaz yelled at me, "Dude, come on." I whipped around to see Chaz halfway out of the shattered window, presumably stepping on the roof. I hurriedly did the same, and the second I made it onto the roof, I heard the door forcefully open. We ran across the roof to the entrance we knew about, not wanting to wait to see if we were being followed. Had the situation not been so dire, I don't know if I would have been able to go through with our plan. The darkness made it nearly impossible to see. One wrong step and we would have been sent tumbling to our deaths. I followed close behind Chaz, and we made it to the roof entrance. It was a little hatch that led to a ladder. Chaz failed to open the hatch up. It was locked from the inside. Just then, we heard a booming voice ring out from somewhere in the distance. "They went that way," yelled the freakishly deep voice. To this day, it was the scariest thing I've ever heard anyone say. Without thinking, I stomped on the hatch as hard as I could with my right foot, and it gave way in a crash loud enough to reveal our position to anyone in the house, let alone someone chasing us on the roof. The force of the impact caused me to fall into the hole, and had it not been for my hands reflexively grabbing the ladder, I wouldn't have been seriously hurt. Chaz screamed at me to go, so I climbed down as fast as I could, trying to ignore the pain in my leg. The two of us sprinted down the other staircase and burst out the back door, jumping the fence and running into the cemetery. Chaz seemed to be fine. He was literally laughing. I, on the other hand, was so scared I could barely think. I never thought squatting behind a gravestone in a cemetery could be so comforting. Chaz and I maintained a watchful eye on the mansion, half expecting someone to be following us. We waited, and just when we thought the coast was clear, we saw a group of 4 or 5 cloaked figures circling the property, frantically searching under bushes and trees. The two of us crept closer into the cemetery, until we were sure there was no chance we could be spotted in the darkness. We hopped the backside fence, and haven't been back to that house since. I can only assume that we stumbled upon some kind of cult meeting or ritual. Why they decided to do it in an abandoned house is something I still ask myself.